When we talk about the signs of a person being a demon, it's crucial to first explore the idea of what a demon represents in both a metaphorical and psychological sense. In many cultures, demons are depicted as malevolent beings, entities that embody evil and chaos, leading to destructive outcomes for individuals and societies. But this understanding is only a piece of the puzzle. In a more nuanced sense, the idea of a demon can also represent certain toxic, destructive, and harmful behaviors that exist within human nature. These are the signs that, when observed in a person, should raise concerns about their true nature and intentions. A demon, metaphorically speaking, is not merely a creature that exists in folklore or religion. A demon is a force within a person that seeks to corrupt, manipulate, and exploit others for personal gain. When we look at the behavior of individuals who demonstrate these kinds of qualities, we can begin to identify certain patterns that reveal the darker side of human nature. It's important to recognize these traits not just as signs of negativity, but as signals that, if left unchecked, can lead to the destruction of relationships, careers, and even societies. One of the first signs of someone who might be characterized by these demonic qualities is a tendency to lie and manipulate. This individual will be skilled in the art of deceit, often weaving complex webs of lies to serve their own interests. These lies are not just harmless white lies. They are calculated, deliberate, and often come with the intention of gaining power, control, or influence over others. The lying may not always be overt. In many cases, it can be subtle, masked behind a facade of charm or sincerity. But underneath, the goal is clear: to deceive, to control, and to manipulate. Such individuals are also often deeply self-centered. The world revolves around their needs, their desires, and their ambitions. They might appear to be generous or caring on the surface, but upon closer examination it becomes clear that their actions are driven by selfish motives. They may use others to get ahead, often without remorse or consideration for the consequences of their actions. Their relationships are transactional, rather than authentic, and they rarely form meaningful connections with others. For them, people are tools, means to an end. Another key characteristic of these demonic individuals is a profound lack of empathy. They are unable or unwilling to understand the emotions or perspectives of others. This lack of empathy is not always a conscious choice, but a reflection of their internal worldview. They see others as obstacles or resources, not as equals deserving of compassion and respect. The inability to empathize with others allows them to exploit, manipulate, and hurt people without feeling guilt or remorse. It's a sign that their capacity for understanding and connection is warped by a more selfish, destructive inner force. Control is a significant driver for these individuals. They may attempt to control others in subtle or overt ways, seeking dominance in their relationships, work environments, and even in social circles. This drive for control can manifest in a variety of ways, from coercive behaviors to passive-aggressive tactics. The need to control others is often a reflection of deep insecurity and fear. By maintaining control, these individuals can shield themselves from the vulnerability that comes with true connection and trust. But this control comes at a cost, as it can lead to toxic environments where others feel oppressed, manipulated, or even frightened. In addition to their desire for control, such individuals often have a deep-seated fear of being exposed for who they truly are. This fear manifests in various ways, such as a constant need for validation or a tendency to deflect criticism. They might become defensive at the slightest hint of judgment, often attacking others to protect their fragile self-image. They are quick to discredit those who challenge them, using gaslighting tactics or outright lies to create confusion and self-doubt in others. Their greatest fear is that someone will see through their facade and expose their true nature. One of the most destructive traits of these individuals is their ability to inspire chaos. They are often agents of disorder, stirring up conflict and division wherever they go. Whether in personal relationships, at work, or in larger societal contexts, they thrive on creating turmoil and confusion. This chaos serves several purposes. It keeps others off balance, making them easier to manipulate. It also allows these individuals to remain in the center of attention, where they can continue to exert control over the situation. The chaos they create is not random, but a deliberate strategy to disrupt and destabilize. Another sign of a person with these destructive tendencies is their tendency to be envious of others. They are constantly comparing themselves to others, and this comparison often leads to feelings of resentment and jealousy. Instead of celebrating the successes of others, they view these accomplishments as threats to their own self-worth. This envy drives them to undermine, belittle, or sabotage those they perceive as competitors. It's a vicious cycle of insecurity, where the individual's need for validation and control leads them to resent anyone who shines brighter than they do. A person who embodies these demonic qualities will also often have a strong need for validation, not through healthy means of recognition or accomplishment, but through constant affirmation of their superiority. This can take the form of seeking praise or admiration from others in excessive amounts, or demanding recognition for things they haven't actually earned. Their identity is tightly tied to their image, and they fear any threat to that image because it represents the loss of power and control. There's also a pattern of dishonesty in their achievements. They may embellish their accomplishments or take credit for things they didn't do. This pattern of dishonesty is not limited to personal achievements but extends to every aspect of their lives, from relationships to business dealings. They often live in a world of illusion, crafting a false narrative to present to the world while hiding the truth behind a wall of lies. But perhaps one of the most alarming signs of such individuals is their ability to isolate those around them. Whether through manipulation, emotional abuse, or outright cruelty, they will try to create divisions between people. They isolate their victims from friends, family, or colleagues, making it easier to maintain control and sow discord. This isolation is a key tactic, as it ensures that the individual is the sole influence on their target, allowing them to continue manipulating and exploiting them without interference. There's also a tendency for these individuals to prey on the vulnerabilities of others. They are quick to identify weaknesses, insecurities, and fears, and they will use these against their victims. Whether it's exploiting someone's financial situation, emotional fragility, or lack of experience, they know how to manipulate situations for their own gain. This preying on vulnerabilities is not just a one-time occurrence, but a consistent pattern of behavior designed to maintain power and control over others. When they interact with others, it's often in a way that is designed to assert their superiority. They might belittle others, insult them, or treat them as inferior, all in an attempt to maintain their sense of dominance. This behavior is not limited to people they perceive as rivals, but can extend to anyone they deem to be beneath them. It's a way of elevating themselves by putting others down, creating an artificial sense of superiority. Moreover, these individuals often have a complete lack of personal responsibility. They refuse to take accountability for their actions and will deflect blame onto others. In many cases, they will twist situations to portray themselves as the victim, even when they are clearly the perpetrator. This avoidance of responsibility is another way they maintain control over others, as it shifts the focus away from their own faults and onto the shortcomings of those around them. The emotional manipulation these individuals employ is often subtle but profoundly impactful. They know how to use guilt, fear, or shame to manipulate others into doing what they want. This emotional manipulation is often cloaked in a veneer of concern or care, making it difficult for the victim to recognize what is happening. They may use phrases like, "You don't care about me," or, "If you really loved me, you would do this for me," to guilt their target into compliance. All of these traits and behaviors stem from a deep-seated need for power, control, and superiority. But at their core, they reflect a profound insecurity and fear. The person who embodies these traits is not just an individual who seeks to harm others for personal gain. They are someone who is deeply troubled by their own internal turmoil. They are driven by an overwhelming need to protect themselves from vulnerability, from exposure, and from the truth of who they are. This is what makes them so dangerous. They are not merely malicious for the sake of malice. They are driven by something deeper, something that compels them to destroy those around them in order to preserve their own fragile sense of self. The demon within them is not a separate entity, but a manifestation of their own internal chaos, insecurities, and fears. It is a force that seeks to dominate, control, and consume, often without the victim even realizing the true extent of the damage being done. Recognizing these signs is crucial because they can help protect you from falling victim to these kinds of individuals. It's not just about identifying harmful behavior, it's about understanding the deeper psychological motivations behind that behavior. When you can recognize the signs of manipulation, deceit, and control, you are better equipped to protect yourself and others from the destructive influence of these demons. The challenge, however, is not simply in recognizing these behaviors, but in addressing them. Confronting individuals who exhibit these traits can be difficult, especially because they are often so adept at manipulating the truth and avoiding responsibility. They will lie, gaslight, and manipulate to maintain their power and control. But the more we are aware of these signs, the better equipped we are to confront them and protect ourselves from the damage they can cause. The demon within these individuals may never fully disappear, but by understanding these signs and learning how to navigate their influence, we can mitigate their impact and protect the integrity of our relationships, communities, and societies. Recognizing the signs is not just about identifying the demon in others, it's about understanding the nature of the force that drives these behaviors and how we can stand against it. The destructive traits we often label as demonic in individuals' manipulation, deceit, control, and emotional exploitation are often rooted in deep-seated insecurities and unresolved internal turmoil. Understanding these behaviors as symptoms of internal chaos, rather than just malicious intent, helps us recognize the true motivations behind harmful actions, allowing us to better navigate relationships and protect ourselves from potential harm. Identifying the signs of harmful, manipulative behavior is crucial for self-preservation and maintaining healthy relationships. Once these patterns are recognized, it's not just about avoiding or distancing ourselves from such individuals, but also understanding how to confront and address their influence. Awareness empowers us to protect our boundaries and dismantle the toxic dynamics that these individuals may create in our lives. When we look at toxic behavior in individuals, we are often quick to label it as simply bad, evil, or malicious. We see someone being manipulative, deceitful, or controlling, and we think they are inherently wrong or bad people. While it's true that these behaviors are harmful, labeling them in such a simplistic manner can prevent us from understanding the underlying causes and the deeper psychological dynamics at play. This approach doesn't help us address the root causes of toxic behavior. It only leads us to focus on symptoms, which often results in ineffective solutions. To truly understand why someone exhibits such behaviors, we need to view them not just as acts of malice but as manifestations of deeper internal struggles. Toxic behavior is often not merely an expression of conscious intent to harm others, but is the result of deep-seated personal turmoil, internal conflicts, and unresolved emotional pain. This is a crucial point because recognizing toxic behavior as a manifestation of internal chaos shifts how we perceive and deal with these actions. At the core of toxic behavior is often an unresolved conflict within the individual. These individuals are often battling their own insecurities, fears, unresolved trauma, and a lack of emotional stability. Toxicity doesn't emerge from nowhere. It emerges from the depths of a person's psyche, from unresolved wounds, unhealed emotional scars, and unmet needs. This chaos manifests in the way they relate to others, the way they communicate, and the way they approach conflict. People who exhibit toxic behavior often lack a coherent sense of self. Their identities are fragmented or unstable, which means that they may fluctuate between exaggerated versions of themselves, constantly compensating for feelings of inadequacy. For example, a person with an unstable self-image might either put themselves on a pedestal or belittle themselves, but neither of these positions are grounded in a healthy understanding of who they truly are. Instead, these behaviors are defense mechanisms designed to protect them from the painful reality of their own vulnerabilities. This lack of emotional coherence or stability doesn't just affect how they see themselves, it drastically affects how they perceive others. When someone is deeply insecure, their worldview is warped by their own self-doubt and fear. They might view others as threats, as competition, or as potential sources of validation. In many cases, this leads to behaviors like manipulation, deceit, or control. These tactics are attempts to maintain some semblance of power, security, or control in a world that feels unstable and unpredictable to them. They manipulate others not necessarily because they are evil, but because they fear that losing control of their relationships or environment will expose their vulnerability. Consider someone who constantly gaslights others, distorting facts and denying reality to make others question their own perceptions. On the surface, this might seem like a deliberate attempt to hurt others, but in reality, it is often the result of deep insecurity. The person feels so uncertain about their own self-worth and reality that they manipulate others to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. This isn't to say that their actions are excusable, but understanding that these behaviors stem from internal chaos can help us approach these situations with more compassion and perspective. The emotional pain that drives these toxic behaviors can often be traced back to childhood experiences or early relationships. Many people who exhibit toxic behaviors have experienced neglect, abuse, or emotional trauma during formative years. These early experiences create emotional wounds that never fully heal, leading the individual to adopt defense mechanisms that later manifest as toxic patterns. A person who has been emotionally abused or neglected might grow up to become someone who seeks to control every aspect of their relationships, or might be so mistrustful that they lie or manipulate to keep others from getting too close. These early wounds also shape how they process and express their emotions. People who haven't learned how to manage their emotions healthily often resort to toxic behaviors as a way of coping. If someone wasn't taught how to express their feelings constructively, they might turn to manipulation, anger, or passive aggressiveness as their primary ways of dealing with discomfort. These behaviors are not just expressions of malice, but are often ways the person has learned to protect themselves from further pain. They may not know any other way to manage their emotions, and thus their internal chaos becomes externalized in their relationships and interactions with others. Furthermore, this internal chaos often leads to an ongoing battle with self-worth. Someone who feels inadequate or unworthy may resort to negative behaviors as a way of compensating for their perceived deficiencies. They may inflate their own achievements, belittle others to feel superior, or engage in cruel or controlling behaviors as a way of seeking validation. These behaviors are a cry for help, a subconscious attempt to fill the void within themselves. This drive for validation is often driven by a deep fear that without it, they will collapse under the weight of their insecurities. Thus, they latch onto unhealthy behaviors in an attempt to create a sense of control or affirmation, despite the negative impact on others. This internal chaos can also make it difficult for toxic individuals to form healthy relationships. Their inability to manage their own emotions and insecurities means they often project their own turmoil onto others. Instead of being able to trust others, they constantly fear betrayal or rejection. This fear might lead them to control their partner's behavior, lie about their own actions, or manipulate situations to ensure they maintain power in the relationship. They cannot trust the world around them because they cannot trust themselves. Their internal chaos is so all-consuming that it blinds them to the possibility of healthy, reciprocal relationships built on trust and understanding. Furthermore, this internal chaos can prevent them from developing empathy. People who are struggling with their own emotional stability often lack the capacity to truly empathize with others because they are so caught up in their own emotional turmoil. Their worldview becomes distorted, and they see others not as human beings with their own experiences and feelings, but as obstacles, competitors, or tools to be used. Their inability to connect emotionally with others perpetuates their toxic behaviors, making it even harder for them to engage in healthy relationships. Without empathy, they are unable to recognize the hurt they cause, and without self-awareness, they can never break the cycle of their toxic patterns. A key aspect of this internal chaos is the lack of self-awareness. Many individuals who exhibit toxic behaviors are not consciously aware of the harm they cause. They might justify their actions to themselves, rationalizing that they are only doing what is necessary to protect themselves or get what they need. The chaotic forces within them can cloud their ability to see how their behaviors affect others. They might truly believe that their actions are justified because in their minds, they are merely responding to the external world's threats or challenges. This lack of self-awareness makes it difficult for them to recognize the need for change or growth. They are stuck in a pattern of survival, unable to see that their tactics for survival are in fact the things causing their downfall. Another crucial element of internal chaos is the inability to accept personal responsibility. Because they are so wrapped up in their own emotional pain, many toxic individuals will deflect responsibility for their actions, instead blaming others for the fallout. This deflection is a defense mechanism, a way of avoiding the painful reality that their actions are harming others. Admitting fault would require them to confront their own internal chaos, to face the insecurities and fears that they have been avoiding for so long. Instead, they cling to their distorted sense of reality and refuse to accept that their behaviors have consequences. Moreover, because they are unable to address their internal chaos, their actions often spiral into a cycle of negative behavior. The more they manipulate, deceive, or hurt others, the more they push people away. The more people distance themselves from them, the more they feel threatened, and this only deepens their emotional pain. The cycle perpetuates itself because they have no healthy outlet for their emotions. or the ability to process their inner turmoil. This creates a feedback loop where toxic behavior leads to isolation, which leads to further chaos, which leads to more toxic behavior. Understanding that toxic behavior stems from internal chaos allows us to approach these individuals with a greater sense of empathy and compassion, even if we must distance ourselves from them. It's not that we should excuse their harmful actions, but by recognizing that their toxicity is often the result of deep emotional wounds and unresolved trauma, we are better equipped to understand the complexities of their behavior. It also helps us avoid simply demonizing them and instead focus on recognizing the emotional distress that is fueling their actions. In some cases, recognizing the connection between internal chaos and toxic behavior can lead to opportunities for healing. If an individual is willing to confront their inner turmoil, they can begin to work through their insecurities, fears, and unresolved pain. With the right support and self-awareness, it's possible for them to break free from their toxic patterns and build healthier ways of engaging with the world. But this process requires a deep commitment to self-examination and emotional growth, something that can only happen when the individual is ready to face the chaos inside them. In conclusion, recognizing toxic behavior as a manifestation of internal chaos shifts how we approach and understand these individuals. Rather than seeing them as purely malicious, we begin to see their actions as the result of unresolved emotional pain and internal struggles. This perspective allows us to respond with greater compassion while also protecting ourselves from harm. It helps us understand that their toxicity is not a reflection of their inherent nature but a symptom of their emotional wounds. Understanding this dynamic enables us to respond more effectively, both in terms of setting boundaries and offering the possibility for healing if the individual is willing to confront their internal chaos. Awareness is the first crucial step in addressing any toxic behavior. It is easy to overlook subtle signs of manipulation, deceit, or control, especially when they are cloaked in charm or seemingly harmless actions. However, once we recognize the underlying patterns, we gain the power to navigate relationships more effectively and protect ourselves from harm. Confronting toxic behavior, on the other hand, is often the most challenging yet essential action to take. It requires not just awareness but the courage to address the issues head-on, regardless of the discomfort or resistance that may arise. Without awareness, toxic behavior can continue unchecked, while without confrontation, the toxic individual may never be held accountable for their actions. Thus, both awareness and confrontation are critical in breaking the cycle of harm that often accompanies toxic individuals. The first key to dealing with toxic behavior is recognizing it. People who engage in manipulative or toxic behavior often do so in ways that are subtle and insidious. They may not always express their toxicity overtly, but instead employ a range of tactics that can slowly erode trust, create confusion, and damage relationships. They may employ gaslighting, passive aggressiveness, guilt tripping, or even overt control tactics like isolation or intimidation. In many cases, toxic individuals will play on your emotions, making it difficult to see the harm they are causing. They might make you question your own perceptions or believe that they are the victims when, in reality, they are the ones instigating conflict. Gaslighting is one of the most damaging and insidious tactics that toxic individuals use. It involves manipulating someone into doubting their own reality, often by denying facts, minimizing their feelings, or twisting events to make them seem irrational or overreactive. A person who frequently gaslights you will make you feel like you are crazy for trusting your instincts or remembering things as they happened. Over time, this form of manipulation can erode your confidence, making you more dependent on them and less able to stand up for yourself. Recognizing gaslighting is vital because it's one of the most difficult forms of manipulation to identify. It's often subtle and gradual, and it can leave the victim questioning their own reality for months or even years. Another common tactic is passive-aggressive behavior. This is where someone expresses their negative feelings indirectly, through behaviors such as procrastination, sullenness, or veiled insults. Passive-aggressive individuals might never say what's on their mind directly, but instead display their discontent through actions that leave others guessing. For example, they might agree to help with something but purposely do it poorly or delay it until it becomes a bigger issue. While they may not be overtly hostile, their passive-aggressive behavior can be just as damaging because it creates frustration and confusion for those around them. When confronted, these individuals often deny their behavior, claiming they didn't mean anything by it. Recognizing passive-aggressive behavior is critical because it allows us to understand the emotional landscape of a relationship and to set clear boundaries when necessary. Toxic individuals are also adept at manipulating emotions, particularly guilt. They know how to exploit your sense of empathy, love, or obligation to get what they want. One of the most common ways this happens is through guilt tripping. A person who is using guilt to manipulate you may say things like, "If you really cared about me, you would do this for me," or "I've done so much for you, and this is how you repay me." This tactic is designed to make you feel responsible for their happiness or emotional state, putting you in a position where you are constantly sacrificing your own needs in order to please them. Recognizing this behavior allows you to stop feeling obligated to meet demands that are unreasonable or toxic. Instead, you can begin to set boundaries that preserve your own well-being. Another form of manipulation is the use of intimidation, whether physical, emotional, or verbal. This might be an overt threat, like, "If you leave me, I'll never speak to you again." Or it could be more subtle, like giving you the silent treatment or making passive-aggressive comments that put you on edge. The goal is to make you feel unsafe, uncertain, or fearful of the consequences of standing up for yourself. Understanding this dynamic is critical because it allows you to recognize that the toxic behavior is not a reflection of your worth, but a sign of their need to control and dominate. Recognizing the tactics of intimidation gives you the tools to de-escalate the situation and to stand firm in your personal boundaries. Once you've developed awareness of toxic behaviors, the next crucial step is confrontation. Confronting toxic behavior is often difficult because it requires not just recognizing the problem, but also taking action to address it. Confrontation can feel uncomfortable and vulnerable, especially when the toxic individual may resist or deny their actions. They might respond with defensiveness, guilt-tripping, or even an emotional outburst. But despite the potential discomfort, confrontation is necessary to stop the cycle of harm and to protect yourself. One of the key aspects of confrontation is to ensure that it is done with clarity and calmness. Confronting toxic behavior doesn't mean launching into an angry or accusatory tirade. In fact, this often only escalates the situation and gives the toxic individual an opportunity to manipulate the narrative. Instead, the goal is to calmly and firmly point out the behavior you have observed and explain how it has affected you. For example, instead of saying, "You're always lying to me," you might say, "When you told me X, I felt hurt because it wasn't the truth." This approach focuses on the impact of the behavior rather than attacking the person, which makes it more difficult for them to deflect or deny. A crucial part of confrontation is also to be prepared for resistance. Toxic individuals often react defensively when confronted because they fear losing control or being exposed. They may deny their actions, accuse you of being overly sensitive, or shift the blame onto you. It's important to remain firm in your stance and not be swayed by these tactics. Stay focused on your feelings and the facts of the situation. Keep your emotions in check and avoid getting drawn into an argument or emotional exchange. This will help maintain your own boundaries while communicating that their behavior is not acceptable. Confrontation should also involve setting clear boundaries. Boundaries are a vital part of maintaining healthy relationships, and they become even more critical when dealing with toxic individuals. By setting boundaries, you are asserting that certain behaviors are not acceptable and that there are consequences for violating those boundaries. Boundaries can take many forms. For instance, you might tell someone that you will no longer engage with them if they continue to lie or manipulate you. Or you might set limits on the types of conversations you are willing to have, making it clear that you will not tolerate emotional abuse or intimidation. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you are being hostile. Rather, it's an assertion of self-respect and a necessary step in maintaining your mental and emotional well-being. However, it's important to note that confrontation and boundaries can sometimes lead to further conflict or escalation, especially if the toxic individual refuses to acknowledge their behavior or changes in response to your confrontation. In these cases, it may become necessary to distance yourself from the individual or even cut ties entirely. This is particularly true if the toxic individual continues to manipulate or harm you despite your efforts to confront their behavior. The most difficult part of this process is accepting that the relationship may need to end or change significantly in order to preserve your own health and well-being. This decision can be painful, especially if the toxic individual is someone you care about or have invested a significant amount of time and energy in. But recognizing that you deserve to be in relationships that are healthy, supportive, and respectful is essential for your own growth and mental health. Another important aspect of confrontation is to recognize that you are not responsible for the toxic individual's reaction. When you confront toxic behavior, the person you are confronting might become defensive, angry, or upset. They might try to turn the tables on you, making you feel guilty or responsible for their emotional state. It's crucial to remember that their emotional reactions are not your responsibility. You cannot control how they respond, but you can control how you respond. If their behavior becomes abusive or manipulative during confrontation, it's important to maintain your boundaries and disengage if necessary. Throughout this process, self-care becomes essential. Confronting toxic behavior can be emotionally draining, especially if it's a repeated cycle or if the individual is particularly resistant to change. After a confrontation, it's vital to take the time to check in with yourself and process your feelings. Seek support from friends, family, or a therapist who can help you navigate the emotional complexities of dealing with toxic individuals. Make sure you prioritize activities that replenish your energy, reduce stress, and reinforce your sense of self-worth. Engaging in self-care helps you maintain resilience and emotional stability throughout the confrontation process. Awareness and confrontation are powerful tools for breaking free from toxic patterns in relationships. Without awareness, toxic behavior can remain hidden and unchecked, silently eroding your sense of self and your relationships. Without confrontation, toxic individuals may never be held accountable for their actions, continuing to manipulate and control those around them. Together, awareness and confrontation create a path toward healthier relationships, where boundaries are respected and emotional well-being is preserved. It's not an easy process, and it often requires difficult decisions and actions. But by developing awareness and the courage to confront toxic behavior, you are taking control of your own life and ensuring that you are surrounded by people who respect and value you. The awareness of toxic patterns, combined with the ability to confront them, empowers you to stand firm in your boundaries and demand the respect you deserve.